What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me through Patreon. Not only is it the best way to support the channel, but additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Now let's get into today's video, and today I thought it'd be kind of cool to look at some past cards that maybe we missed, maybe people aren't running, and maybe people should be running. So without further ado, we're going to talk about 15 cards that I think people missed last year, and we're going to start off with like some lower ones and then kind of get into the big stuff at the end of the video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start it off with Seer of Stolen Sight. Now, I think this one doesn't get ran because honestly, it's 3 mana, and 3 mana now is kind of like, if it doesn't give you insane value, we're just not on it. But I think if we're running a lot of treasure tokens or just a huge artifact strategy that cares about the graveyard, this thing, girl, I don't know, deserves a slot. Honestly, Surveil is super underrated and can really rifle you through your library at an insane rate, getting you to those key pieces that you need. So I think this card definitely deserves a chance. Moving on, we have Tyvar, another card that I thought was not that great looking at it, but in play, it's one of those cards that just plays a lot better than it reads. The fact that all of our mana dorks have haste now, our broken activated ability commanders have haste now. Basically, if you're on a strategy with a lot of elves, if you're on a strategy with a lot of activated abilities, or even if your commander has an activated ability, this card is worth it because you don't even really need to care about the graveyard. This is basically a 1,000-year elixir on a planeswalker, and honestly, I'm here for it. It's amazing in TIM, honestly busted in TIM, and probably anything, like I said, where your commander has an activated ability. Moving on, we have Battle for Bywater, and honestly, I think this one gets overlooked just because we have a ton of effects like this already, but make no mistake, these effects are really powerful. One-sided board wipes are very useful, so in those decks that are just trying to go wide and play low to the ground, definitely shove this in here. Like I said, I think it just got overlooked mostly because we already have a ton of effects like this, but it's very budget, very new, and again, very effective. Moving on, I do think 3 Blind Mice has some utility, but it's kind of very niche at the same time. Like in decks like Calyx, Guided by Fate, or Anarchia, where you can turn it into a token, it's absolutely busted because it can start copying itself. So in decks where you're trying to do crazy stuff, make token copies of stuff that are not supposed to be tokens, this is going to be an amazing card in there. And again, this is one of those cards that came out after Anarchia and after Calyx, so it's one of those cards that is just not going to show up on those lists very often. So I thought it'd talk about it at the end of the year. Maybe if you have an Anarchia or a Calyx list, shove this in there. It's extremely busted. Moving on to one of my favorite picks, I like Leyline Immersion. I love this card and I think more people should be on it. Now, why I think it is underplayed is because it's in green and you have to enchant a legendary creature. So a lot of the legendary green creatures, especially if it's your commander, want to be attacking. So definitely only play this in decks where your commander just so happens to be in green and you really don't care about attacking. I know that's few and far between, but Paco and Haldan fit this role amazingly. Now Paco wants to be getting in there and attacking in the red zone, but Haldan doesn't give a shit. So you just throw this on Haldan and boom, you have a thing that just taps for 5 mana of any color combinations. Notably, this is mana positive, which is why I think it's so good. It costs 4 mana, it gives your commander protection, and then it taps for 5 mana. So the turn it comes down, you're actually gaining mana instead of losing mana, which again is why Soul Ring's so busted. So I think people need to be taking another look at this card. Again, if your commander just so happens to be in green and you don't care about attacking with your commander, I think this should be in the deck. Sisse? Pretty good, right? Now, let's look at the Meep. Now, they just kind of shoved this and snuck this into a secret layer. This secret layer is still active, so if you want this card, you can still go get it. I think there's 15 hours left at the recording time of this video, but I think it's going to be pretty good. It's kind of like a Pathbreaker Ibex effect in black. Now, notably, it does do CMC and not power, so it's not as abusable, but in stuff like, let's say Satoru, now we can cheat big stuff into play and we have a Pathbreaker Ibex effect. Additionally, even in Yuriko, I could kind of see this being viable. You do play big creatures in there and sometimes you can cast those big creatures. That 15 mana thing that you can cast for 2 mana, that's going to be pretty Wow, my mouth just stopped working. That's going to be pretty broken with this card, so maybe it's worth an include there depending on the build, but if you're running extra turns, don't even bother, right? Now, moving on, we are going to talk about Ramble Familiar. I think this is another underrated card, but again, I just like graveyard strategies. It comes down early, it's a mana dork in the early game. Late game, if you need some more card advantage or just filling the graveyard is what you want to do, this is an amazing card, and you can do it repeatedly, right? You can go ahead, use the adventure, cast the creature, return the creature to hand, use the adventure. Now, it's very slow, but also very powerful at the same time, because cheating creatures into play is just one of the powerful thing, or one of the more powerful things you can do in Magic. Now, moving on, hit the Motherload. This is one of those cards that solves the problem of what if I get ramp off of my Cascade trigger. Now, this is Discover, but Discover's just Cascade but fixed, right? And honestly, I think Discover's a lot more powerful than Cascade in some instances, because you can now play counter spells in your Discover decks, which is kind of busted, right? You can draw the card instead of just casting it. But like I said, this fixes the problem of what if I just get Cultivate off of my Hit the Motherload? Well, you'll be rewarded with a ton of treasure tokens equal to the difference. So not only is this a ritual, additionally, you get to cast a spell for free. So I've just been shoving it in some of my decks, and honestly, it's been performing really well. Thundurus Debut. Now, I think this card gets a bad rap because it kind of looks like Tooth and Nail, right? The only difference is it does not grab your 2-creature infinite combo outright, and you don't win the game outright. So it's kind of more of a high-risk, high-reward card, right? So you can cast it. If it gets countered, it sucks. You can cast it. You can dig 20 cards deep, and sometimes you don't get a lot of value. So I think it's more acceptable in casual than Tooth and Nail, right? If people see Tooth and Nail and then they grab their 2-card infinite combo, it's like, okay, you did the thing. It doesn't feel like you deserve the win, but you got the win, right? So I think that's why people are off Tooth and Nail. This is Tooth and Nail with some variance, right? Am I going to hit what I need? Am I going to get value out of it? Am I just going to whiff? So it's definitely a more casual accepted card. So I think people, if you wanted to run it and you were worried about it being too powerful or akin to Tooth and Nail, I think you can kind of get rid of those worries, and I say run it, right? Another thing is Return of the Past. Now, this is kind of Past in Flames, but on an enchantment, which is crazy. So you can get accumulated value over several turns with this. In your Storm decks, this is a late game bomb. The problem is the problem I have with Past in Flames is the fact that you can cast it and you just sunk 5 mana into a spell. You're not going to have a lot of mana to utilize the cards in your graveyard unless they're cantrippy, which they probably should be to begin with if you're running Past in Flames. But this kind of fixes that problem. You can kind of just slam this as a value piece and just get accumulated value over the course of a game. You don't get punished because, again, you spend the 6 mana, wait a turn, and boom, it's still active. So I think more people should be on this, especially if you used to be on Past in Flames and you took it out of a deck. Try this card instead. Like, you will have to take a turn off, but I think it's worth it. Moving on, we have Return. Oh, wait. Now, let's talk about some unfun cards. We have Out of Time. This comes down, and yes, it's that dreaded word, phasing. If you don't know what that is, it basically just says, hey, your permanent does not exist, and then we're going to throw time counters on this, and whenever it, gets bounced or whatever, it leaves the battlefield, everything can come back. Notably, your commander does not change zones, so you will not get the option to put your commander in the command zone. This can break a deck very easily, especially if someone gets off, goes fast, and you haven't played any of your key pieces yet. You can slam this down and really screw them over, especially if you're like a enchantment strategy. You don't really care about creatures that much. Yeah, this is going to be backbreaking for certain playstyles, and honestly, a 3-mana board wipe that can get rid of a commander or several commanders is going to be pretty powerful. Now, the Pandora is kind of in the same vein, right? We are phasing out someone's permanent. This is one of the best cards and one of the worst cards at the same time, if you're sitting across from the table, right? Because at the you're looking at that and you're like, okay, that solves the biggest problem right now. But then you're like, if I become the biggest problem, it's going to solve me. So it's kind of a love-hate if you're sitting across the table from it. I've had it save games where I'm very thankful for it. And then I've had it phase out my commander and get completely screwed by it. Either way, I think it's an extremely powerful card that can be very powerful used right, right? Extremely powerful card used right. What? I don't know. I'm not making any sense at this point. Just play the card, right? Moving on. We have Mists of Lauran. Now, they kind of snuck this card in as like the Lord of the Rings Christmas thing. I don't know. I don't know if you guys knew, but they did have another pseudo Lord of the Rings drop that had a little bit extra cards in it. So definitely go take that or check that out if you haven't already. And Mists of Lauran was one of it. It is or sorcery speed, which kind of hurts it, but the fact that we can copy it and kind of get a pseudo cyclonic rift is very useful. We can make it not hit our permanents, but we can make it hit all of our opponents' impactful permanents. Notably, it has replicate, so we can just do this as many times as we want and bounce as many CMCs as we want. Notably, you can choose 0 and bounce all tokens. In a deck where you actually want to bounce your things, this is going to be amazing too, because you can help your strategy while hurting your opponents, so it's going to be very powerful in artifact storm builds that just want to bounce their artifacts back to their hand that can play them again. This card's going to be extremely powerful, I think, and people are going to see that the more they've seen it played, and it will win games, in my opinion. We do have Nasgoul Battle Ma as well. They put it that betrays on an enchant, or sorry, on an equipment. So now you can run it that betrays in your equipment decks. Kind of busted. Now, I think this is more of a Timmy card, but I'm here for it, guys. I like fun cards that do weird things, and this is a fun card that does a weird thing. We just get to make people sacrifice things, we get Annihilator, and then we get those things. So it's going to be very fun for those non-token strategies that run a lot of bombs. Those bombs are now going to be ours. So again, I'm here for it. Timmy card, but seems pretty fun. And last but not least, we have Horn of the Mark. Now, when this first came out, I was definitely on it, but I was like, Boros players, red players are going to love this for their aggro strategies. And then I'm just like, if you're running a lot of creatures, put this in the deck. The fact that you get to look 5 deep and grab whatever creature you want is very impactful. So I think you could even run this in green, even though we have a lot of card advantage options already, if you're running a high amount of creatures. The fact that it digs you so deep, it gets you something very specific, and you can do it very quick. It's only 2 mana, so it comes down a lot faster than your Beast Whisperers or your Great Hinges, right? That require some buildup. It comes down very early. It was definitely meant for the red and Boros players, and they needed it, and it's amazing in those decks. But the fact that it's colorless means, hey, we can abuse it in any strategy. Even in your Azorius flying deck that plays a lot of flyers, shove it in there as well. This card just digs you deep and gets you to your key pieces, and honestly, I think if you're not already on it, you could get on it and definitely try it out. When I've played it, I was like, oh, this could probably just go in any deck running 30 plus creatures. So without further ado, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I covered something you guys haven't seen this year. Again, there was a lot, so there was a lot to miss. Hopefully, this video helped you out. And remember, if you do want that meep, it is on a secret layer. Not that I'm pushing it or anything, or just proxy or whatever. Like I said, they've been sneaking unique cards into secret layers recently, which I'm not really a fan of. But if you want the meep, you want to see the meep is on a secret layer, and those are very easy to miss. With that being said, I would like to thank my patrons, Newsome, Excessum, Chicken Salad, you guys are amazing, you keep the channel going, as well as all my other patrons that vote weekly on a voted deck tech. If you want to become a part of the weekly vote of the deck tech that I do, you can join the Patreon and then join the Discord, and you will get to vote on that. So without further ado, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.